you've got to start with the customer experience and work backwards to the technology. You can't start with the technology and try to figure out where you're going to try to sell it. And I've made this mistake probably more than anybody else in this room. And I've got the scar tissue to prove it. And I know that it's the case. What incredible benefits can we give to the customer? Where can we take the customer?
Hi, I'm Chris Covell.
And I'm Mustafa.
Welcome to YouX, the podcast at the intersection of research, design, and development. So for this one, this is actually our first YouX Freestyle that we're now going to be releasing. We recorded it before the last one that was released. So Mustafa, how do you think that the idea of having a YouX Freestyle series is going? Do you think that it's something that we want to continue doing, or maybe we'll eventually kind of get tired of it and move on to doing more structured episodes? So how do you think it's going so far?
I'm loving it. I'm enjoying it, and I hope the listeners out there are enjoying it as well. It kind of goes back to some of our original conversations we used to have and just catch up every month or so, which if essentially inspired us, to do this podcast in the first place. So it's a bit of a back to basics, which is a good thing. And I'm really enjoying it. I feel like we're really getting the real conversations and the real heartfelt discussions out there.
Yeah, no, totally agree. And hopefully we don't come off like we're ranting all that much, and we're making coherent sense most of the time. So would love your feedback, and make sure to share the podcast and subscribe and leave comments below if you want to join in the conversation. So enjoy the episode.
Welcome to YouX, the global podcast at the intersection of research, design, and development. Sit back and listen as your hosts explore the ever-evolving world of user experience. And now, Chris Covell and Mustafa Ahmed.
All right, welcome to YouX. Mustafa, how's it going today?
Good, Chris. It's been a long week, but we're back for another one.
It's been I think 7 or 8 episodes, a few months now that we've been doing this practically every other week. We've had a few guests, different topics that we've talked about. So I kind of want to maybe start off with asking you if anything has changed, because I know that originally when we decided to start having these conversations, they were basically just an outgrowth of like conversations we were having already, just catching up, talking about the industry, talking about how each of us were doing, this kind of thing. So we didn't really have too many expectations when we started it, but like now, a few months in, I don't know, I'm kind of get your take of like what you want out of this podcast, what you think that like what purpose it serves, if it does serve any purpose.
Yeah. So, when we started this out, it was, like you said, we were just catching up and stuff. And when, the initial plan that we had was that let's just do the same conversations, but just hit record this time and edit it and throw it out on the internet and see what happens. But I think, we obviously,
there was not a lot of conscious thought put into it. We were just going to kind of say like, hey, let's go for it and see what happens.
Yeah, but then I guess naturally with time, we just kind of became a little bit more structured, a little bit more organized, and, started really thinking about the topics that went in, which also then kind of created this whole formal tone of voice that we developed on these podcasts, especially when we had guests on. And it just got me thinking that we had, we're not having the same kind of conversations as we were privately having on a Zoom call, where we were just purely off the cuff and just borderline ranting about the different challenges we've been going through in our roles. And honestly, I kind of miss that, right? And I was just thinking that it's been a while. Maybe we just do an episode and just see how this one goes.
No, I think this is good maybe for a good, a theme that we're going to hopefully try to kind of do more often. So like when we don't have a topic or when we don't have a guest or something like that, we can do one of these unhinged episodes and just talk off the cuff, talk more about how things are going, what we're currently going through, what's on our mind, this kind of thing.
So, I mean, for me personally, right, it's been pretty hectic. Obviously working as a research lead, but as part of an R&D team, but having to lean a lot more into the some of the design projects as well, which have been fun. Don't get me wrong; it's been great to kind of jump on those kind of projects and start to really spread the wings and pick up some new skills along the way. But I think more than anything, man, just this challenge of just constantly trying to educate stakeholders and evangelize what we do. And you kind of finish a project thinking, okay, great, now everybody finally understands how we work and what we do. It should be smooth then, on the next one. Next project comes around, brand new set of stakeholders. You're kind of doing that whole thing all over again.
Yeah, this is a good topic. I think that we can definitely get into for sure, because I think that it's something that a lot of people go through, right? It's not just localized to you and me. And it kind of gets into some topics we've talked about already, like, team structure and maturity level and this kind of thing. But one of the things that I've actually heard you say that I think I might not know what you're exactly referring to, and I might have a slight bone to pick. So let's see if that's actually the case. But when you say, you mentioned R&D, when you say R&D, I've brought this up too a few times where I use the term R&D. When I say it, I mean research and development, and the key word there is development. I think when you say it, you mean research and design. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. No, I mean, you're absolutely right. I guess the more commonly known term is research and development.
Historically speaking,
yeah.
That's what people refer to when they say R&D.
Exactly. So, I mean, so I guess let me just quickly give you a little history on where this came from. Our team was honestly just purely known as the design team, right? And that constituted of service designers, product designers, content writers, and researchers. And personally, kind of really bugged me that the word research is not in it. So I've been just, pushing my propaganda across of just getting our team called as the R&D team to get the word research and design.
Opened up design to call it research and design together, not just design and then having research be like a component of design, right?
Exactly, because research just becomes part of the background and nobody really fully understands what we do then. That's
another thing too from the begin. I think it's changing slowly, but especially when I started, researchers were seen as almost, like their role was relegated as like not as a kind of almost like, errand boys or something for designers. Or I've gotten that. I got that impression, at least in the beginning. It's changing. And I think actually separating in the industry, having dedicated researchers and having dedicated designers, because I think before, like historically speaking, it was all the same thing. And having the two roles that have like that are with individuals with research and design in their title, so researchers and designers, I think helps. But I can see your point, but partly why, because it goes back to something that that we talked about before, which is like, I think I even mentioned like what would be like one of the main changes I would want to see within the industry to help with, I think it was the digital first, but not digital only conversation. But what I was saying when I used the term research and design, or excuse me, R&D, and I mean research and development, that term development, I think, is really key. And it gets to a little bit about your irritation that you were talking about, like trying to talk to stakeholders and like re-educate and get everybody on the same page about like what it is that we do and how we operate. One of the things I've struggled with not just stakeholders, but with actual UX people is like, you'll get into a project or something and there won't be a clear understanding that what we're up to is actually development. What we're trying to do is produce something tangible at the end of, as an outcome. And that's why I feel like saying at a high level as a strategic point of view that like what we're up to, this is to researchers, this is to designers, to service designers, everybody in UX, but also with stakeholders. Like our specialty is, you can bring in, design thinking. I don't think you have to. It's just what's one like framework. But what we do is we are human-centered innovation. We are human-centered development process, and there's a process, a start, a beginning, and an end. And for whatever reason, that seems to be hard for people to. I've found it in many teams. It's more of a rule than an exception, unfortunately. But like that seems to not be commonly understood cross-functionally.
Yeah, no, I definitely see that as well. And the way I look at it is, right, and I love our UX people. Like, don't get me wrong, but I think us as researchers, we're just naturally, just by the pure nature of what we do, we're just naturally more inclined to be strategists, right? Just based on the fact that we're looking at more overarching things, we're focusing on the big picture, we're thinking and talking to customers about stuff that may or may not become reality down the road, right? So we're always kind of thinking big in that sense.
So would you say then what you're saying is that you think researchers are more strategic typically just by the nature of the work they do than versus say a designer or a product person or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like if I had to break it into 3 levels, right? That, pure tactical, just caring about what I have to do right now at the bottom, that, absolute big picture kind of strategic at the top. And then I guess, there's something in the middle there, right? Us as researchers were right at the top.
Land.
No man's land. Yeah, like a nice middle ground there between the two, right?
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So us as researchers were right at the top in that strategic bit, right? Your designers, your UX, UI, visual designers, those guys are right at the bottom, just purely thinking about, okay, I've got this journey, got to make this thing look good, got to make this thing usable, right? Just only thinking about that. And then you got your product guys in the middle.
I think that, I don't know, to play devil's advocate here, I can see research being tactical as well. I mean, and I don't think that you're saying that, right? But like, just to first like say that I don't think all the research that we do is strategic, right? Like for example, a usability study, I don't find that to be, that's pretty tactical. Yeah. Would you say that's right?
I mean, tactical today, but that was what was the usability study you're probably doing for that journey was probably part of a strategic discussion 3 months ago. Right. So it's a strategic thought or discussion or you mean the decision, the decision to do a usability study when it happens is strategic, but then the recommendations that come out of it are more tactical. Yeah. No, let me try to reframe that. Right. So think about it this way. Right. So let's say that you went out in the field, did a bit of exploratory work because there was an overarching sort of vision that the company had, and you wanted to go out and validate that and learn more about that kind of space, right? Let's say everything came back great. The research validated that this is the right way to go. You're at the forefront of that strategic discussion with, senior stakeholders. So you kind of have now
sorry to interrupt. Let's try to, I have a rule that I want to try to implement here, but we shouldn't, I don't think we should talk about research and validation in the same breath. I think using the term validation is not conducive of the type of work we do, but that's a different topic that we could talk about later. But anyway.
Oh yeah. I'm kind of dumbing it down just for the sake of putting this example across. Yeah. All right. So let's say we found out that, this is probably the way we want to direction as a company we want to move into. And so now us as researchers, we kind of almost have a sort of seat at the table at that strategic point that this is the direction an organization's moving into. Fast forward 3-4 months, it's gone through the design team, it's come down as a project, it's become very formal as part of a project team's deliverable. Designers are designing the journeys for that. And now it finally comes back to us as researchers just to go out and do a usability study, right? On that same...
Yeah, to test those prototypes, right?
Right. So once upon a time, it was part of the strategic discussion. And now today, it's a tactical thing, right? Of where we're just, supporting the product team with the usability study.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think you're putting your finger on a few things. One, the incentive structure, I think, especially from like a product point of view, product managers, is not great in terms of the user experience. It's incentive. I think the way that the organizations are structured, teams are structured, is really about them delivering and shipping, not so much about caring. Like just kind of getting the requirements out the door, not caring about thinking about how, like to use, I think, your phrase, the cascading effect. I mean, one of the things also that I would question, or like maybe I would want us to focus on, that could help your scenario, like solve a problem, which is like how that feature, why are we working on it in the first place? Like if it's just some executive's, hunch that this is what, like, or some other app is doing it, so let's just like, match what they're up to. And then, okay, you go and ask customers, and if the research is just very lo-fi of all you want is thumbs up, thumbs down, you get thumbs up, fine. Then you implement it, and you're implementing it in a vacuum, and then it comes into the big picture, and it starts causing havoc because no one's actually thought through of how it will affect the overall experience. I would say that one way to remedy that is starting with understanding the experience and the pain that goes into that's happening within the experience, and having research actually dictate what it is that we want to focus on. So have the research begin very open, like very agnostic as to like what it is that we're going to be doing, discovering problems. From those problems, then those are like the seeds, right? But I don't know. A lot of times companies don't want to work. I don't think they want to work that way. I don't think they want to, again, it's obviously all companies there's a very variability. But from how I've interpreted these things happening, and from who I've talked to and this kind of thing, I've gotten the impression that it's like, I don't know if they want to like, talk about power or whatever. Like they don't want to give all of the decision-making responsibilities to researchers finding pain points. Is that they typically just say, okay, we're going to start the development process really without doing any research. We're going to validate the ideas that we have based on whatever. And then from there, then you have all these like separate projects happening. But if you were to do the research, and you were to have researchers, I think, who, understand business strategy and understand how design works, then I think it'd be easier to locate problems, know that these are the problems that we want to focus on. And if we solve these problems, they'll increase the experience holistically, like because we as researchers are looking big picture. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I get what you mean.
That's one like way to come at it, I guess.
So I think in our case, in the situation I'm in, I think there is an alignment between, well, senior management and research, in the sense that, yeah, senior management, they may have started as, I think this is a good idea, but it also could have been that we did our research independently and also came to the exact same conclusion that, yeah, this is actually a good idea, right? Where it's, and the good idea is extremely big and broad, that let's say, yeah, we need to fix this massive component, but yeah, once it starts getting specific, and depending on who handles the specific domains and responsibilities, that's when the lines start to get very, not blurred, but actually very clear between the project teams. But as a research and design team, that doesn't matter to us, because we care about the whole experience end to end, right? So I don't care what lines you're going to draw and then say that, okay, I'll only work on these features and another project team works on those. That doesn't matter to me. I'm trying to deliver the best possible experience I can, right? And if the only way for me to be able to do that is to look at this thing holistically, look at the customer experience and not just the user experience, and really think about all the individual touch points, all the individual issues and problems, the root causes of certain things, and try to really stitch something together that feels natural and not isolated to just one part of the app, right? So there are going to be things other project teams are going to have to take on and do that originally may not have been part of their plan. But hey, if all we're going to work on this thing together, then that's how it's going to be.
I think one way to look at it too is like how you carve the company or the product features by the joints. Do you see what I mean? Like, so it's like if you, I don't know, it's partly why like bigger companies struggle. But if you have a really big enterprise, you have all these different teams and you have all these different products and all these different features, you know, in this massive ecosystem, and how to draw lines around which teams work on what can be challenging. If it's a small little app that serves one function, then you have a team of like 5 or 6 people, and it would be silly, right, to think that they wouldn't understand the full experience, because the experience is pretty limited just because of the scope of what the business or what the app itself is doing. But as you scale that, I mean, it may be a reason why innovation is so hard for some when companies get too big, because you have to go through all these lines. The company kind of gets fractured into these different teams, and knowing what affects something else can be you get tangled up. You can get tangled up in it, you know. So I think one of the ways to solve it is, I don't know, would be to know how to draw those lines and know which teams are working on what. And if a team is working on something that affects something else, then maybe those two teams need to like merge together or something. And then they're both working together so they know what each other are doing and they belong together. It's a kind of like a categorization exercise of like, how do you categorize your business so that innovation can happen and you don't slow down, you don't get, and you can think big picture if you have to, because you know that this feature coming in to be worked on, everything that it touches, everybody's there.
No, I mean, I totally agree with what you're saying, because it's actually one of the things that we try to do, and it's helped, right? Of getting these different teams that didn't know were connected to start talking. It's definitely created some alignment, which I guess is just proof in the pudding. But you're also right that there is no silver bullet to this, and it can get really tricky really fast when I guess when project teams are more empowered than R&D teams, managing those conversations and trying to get people to start to see the big picture almost sometimes feels like a broken record half the time, right? That it's like, guys, this is.
I want to jump in, and I want to talk again about R&D, because I feel like this is a really important point. So when I say R&D, right, like I said before, I mean research and development. And when you say it, you mean research and design. Maybe we should talk a little bit and then resume your discussion about how to structure an organization around innovation, it seems, or around experience, which is very difficult because experience is everything. And it's like when you're fragmenting the experience, then when you fragment the company into these different buckets, the experience gets fragmented, and then the customer suffers, right?
Yes, precisely.
Yeah. So how do you, so it's yeah, I don't know, boy, but I and it's not something, and I want to get your take on this too, because it's something that UXers don't talk about very much. I don't hear it occur very much, which is research and development. And typically, from a historical point of view, research and development has been more like I think we even talked about in this podcast, like has been more like engineering heavy. So like manufacturing, I think one of the most famous, one of the first, I think it goes all the way back to like Edison, and his Menlo Park. But one of the big R&D firms or R&D teams was at in AT&T, and there it was a lot of engineers, a lot of scientists, and they were like, I think, focusing really not so much on like experiences, so to speak. I think the work that they were innovating can influence the customer experiences, but it was more like, for example, the transistor, and it was more like technical, more around manufacturing, but like more service, like service companies, like, so for example, banking, right? It's a kind of a weird concept, I think, to have an R&D, research and design team embedded into a big bank, right? Because it's like, what is banks manufacturing? They're really not, they're not like making any physical objects. Like, why would you need like a chemical engineer or a mechanical engineer? I mean, obviously there are some instances, but I think for the most part, you wouldn't want to spend a lot of your budget on having these R&D teams. But I think why I want to call what UX is, or what UXers do as development, I think it'll just help get clear about what this UX thing is, which is more of like taking services or experiences and innovating services or experiences. Like one of the examples I can use is, I think Citibank was the first bank to use an ATM machine, right? Back in the 70s, and obviously that's a physical object, which engineers were needed to use to like create the actual physical object, but it fit within a broader service, and it was more about an experience where people can get money without having to go into branches, or like, branches were closed a lot of hours during the day or on weekends and this kind of thing. And people wanted cash and they couldn't get cash. And they had these little mini, I almost feel like an ATM is like a little mini bank, right? You can look at it that way. Nowadays with credit cards and like the apps and this kind of thing, like ATMs aren't as probably as popular as they once were, or as important. But at that time, it was a big step forward. But that's innovation that happened, specifically in a bank, banking, a service, I would call a service and innovation. And that's why I feel like we want to talk a lot. We should be talking more about UX as part of a development process, part of our research and development, because we're developing out, even if it's a redesign, even if doesn't have to be a product or service. It doesn't have to be like a groundbreaking innovation, but it's developing. Whenever you have a researcher or designer working on something, it's towards some end state or end goal. Sometimes that gets lost. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I see what you mean.
But then calling it like you call it, R&D, research and design, that doesn't capture what I mean by R&D, which is research and development. I mean, it leaves out the design part, I guess you could say, but I think it's the design part is kind of like, it's taken for granted when you say R&D, that design matters, and it's more focused actually on design than engineering for sure. It's more about thinking. The way I look at it is thinking about future states, understanding current states and thinking about future states, and how we can make the experience. It's innovating or engineering an experience, not so much engineering a like a machine or something. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's what I would really like the field to try to embrace a little bit more, is because you get kind of hints of it every now and again, but it's not explicit that this is what we do. And it seems like when it is explicit, and I'm on teams that know that, and it doesn't even have to be like, again, a product or service. It can be like you're looking to change a process or something like that, or reduce waste, or reduce cost or something like that, or influence possibly like a marketing campaign, right? But that goal in mind, that we're developing something, and we're going towards some sort of outcome. Typically, for some, at least when it comes to teams that I've been on that have very low UX maturity levels, that gets lost, and it's kind of like we're scrambling and people are going in different directions, and they don't understand. Like, the research is not talking to design. There's no framework bringing it all together. And the framework for me, the easy answer to that framework is we are a development team, even though we're not engineers. And I think that just helps business people understand. It goes back to your point originally. You were talking about like you're getting tired, and I understand what you mean. You're getting tired about working with stakeholders and like them not getting it.
Yeah. So okay. So let me try to add on to and comment on that. So
and that's the only reason why I'm trying to be a stickler about saying when we say R&D, we should mean research and development, and we shouldn't mean research and design, because I think it makes the conversation, it changes the conversation.
Yeah. No, I get your points. But I'm gonna respectfully disagree.
Please.
And I'll tell you where I'm coming from in this, right? And the way I look at it is that the challenges I'm facing, where people just don't seem to get it and don't understand that our team, the research and design team, is I'm gonna call it, because that's what we're formerly actually called. They don't get that we're actually in charge of the experience. Why? Because they actually do look at us as a development team, right? Which as when you look at developers, right? And if you look at the actual job title, software developers, right? The word developer is always tied back to software and technology, and that domain, that department of IT that is usually separate from an experience department.
I would say it gets tied back maybe to to engineering, but maybe we would disagree with that too.
No, that's actually not wrong.
Because I think a developer,
engineering.
I think a developer is an engineer. Yeah.
Yeah, historically did start out as engineering, and then with the dawn of the internet age, pivoted to more software developers, where you're still developing something or building something that requires a heavy technical understanding, which shares a lot in terms of the disciplines between engineers and computer scientists.
I think that's right. I think tying together development and someone with technical, like very hardcore technical abilities is a good way of distinguishing it. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And I think because, development teams have historically just been, enablers, right? That's how they're viewed as. And that's just the I guess the brand image that they've got now. that, okay, you want to do something, put your requirements together, give it to the development team, they'll do it, and then you just kind of manage them and just see whether they developed or built something that's up to your requirements and what you've asked for, because you're the product guy. You're the guy who's asking for this now, right? You're the guy who ultimately decides what goes out there. So when you have these kind of project teams looking at designers or researchers as developers, that's kind of looking at, the guy who's going to do the stuff for me, who does what I say, is now trying to call the shots, right? And that's where the divide is, which...
So what I think, so what I think you're saying is that, like, you don't like referring to researchers and designers as development because it seems like we're order takers.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because typically in the past, businesses have gone to development teams, right, and said, like, this is what we're up to. This is this is what we want from you. Develop it for us, and then we'll, like, tell you if it's good or bad or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. No, that I see what you mean for sure, and I can understand. I can understand why you wouldn't want that.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it's that's the kind of the, I guess, the mindset we're trying to steer away from, right? So our team was originally just called the design team, right? The design team, and like I said earlier, I felt like research was getting was effectively a bit of taking a back seat, and most people didn't really understand the power and value of research. And as a means of making it more relevant, I guess, using more of a marketing tactic here more than anything, is to now just get people to constantly refer to us as the research and design team, so that at the back of their mind, they constantly think of research as, wow, okay, it's that important that it's the first thing in the name.
I agree with you that people typically, even on UX teams, sometimes, unfortunately, don't see the value of research. I think the way I look at it is because it's what we're up to is a very abstract, sometimes intangible thing, which is building knowledge. Like, that's a very abstract sounding thing. And it's like, people struggle sometimes to understand why take the time to really validate, here we go with validating, but to really understand the context of what you want to be understood, starting there, and then kind of building out a strategy from that foundational understanding that typically gets overlooked, or just, I don't know, it's not taught in business schools. I'm not sure actually, but it does seem to be skipped. But it's an interesting thing because, and there's a tension, I think, that's forming that I find interesting, because it's like, you don't want us to be called development teams because there's a tacit agreement, which is like, the development team is working for the business. And I agree that that's not a good dynamic to set up. But then there's this other thing, confusion or issue that's kind of like the opposite, which is like, well, people aren't giving designers or researchers enough, aren't understanding what it is that they do. How do they help? What service, in the past, when businesses would go to development teams, engineers, let's say, or software engineers, they knew what they did. They knew that they were going to take, these requirements or whatever, maybe do some research, possibly maybe massage them a little bit, but get something out the door. And they even though they were the ones who were, like, giving the orders, like, they at least knew that this team was valuable. Whereas now you have these research and designers, and I think a lot of times the business, and sometimes even the UX team, the research and design team, are like, what do we do? Like, what is our role? So, like, my solution is, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to say that we're a development team, but you're right. If we do that, we have to be careful, because saying we're a development team makes us valuable because we're developing things out, and it's part of the process of knowledge building. There's your researchers, designers, prototyping, research again, which is testing. And that's the process, the development process. And then ultimately it gets implemented, and then you get your engineers to come back. There's the development process. That's what gives us value. But you're right. We don't want to make it seem as if, okay, so we're just order takers because we're development. So it's how do you navigate those two sides of it? You know?
Yeah,
I don't know.
No, absolutely. And I think where the challenge really stems from is that back, rewind maybe 20 years back, right? If you wanted to get something done and you had to go to the development team, there was no other option. You couldn't just figure it out on your own as a dude with a finance major and start building a website and launching an app. That was not possible back then. Yes, okay, maybe now it's kind of possible with a lot of these no-code solutions, which aren't really that great to begin with.
Though, no one wants to rely on that.
Exactly, but back then you were screwed. There was nothing you could do, right? But if you think about our research and design teams back then, research could easily be replaced with, oh, I have a gut feeling and I'm just going to do this, or I spoke to 3 people and I think this is a good idea,
or
right?
my competitors are doing this, so let's just copy.
Exactly. So that's how they dismiss research. And then design, man, I've seen people put together screen designs in PowerPoint, right? And confidently explain how this is going to work.
Talk about lo-fi.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So I've seen that. I've seen requirements given to developers and developers who then build out screens in code that look horrible because they're not designers, right? But gets the job done. So technically they've done their part and everybody's happy with it because there's nobody competent enough from a design background to actually challenge that on the team. So that's also happened. So historically, there's been many ways to dismiss the need of a research and design capability on the team, and unfortunately, and that's never been the case for technology, because if you don't have them, well, you can't do anything, right? And so to explain to people that this is what we do. Unlike a technology team, we can't just go off the back and say that, you know what we're good at, so, let us do what we do. We don't have that leverage because people don't know what we're good at, because historically we've been dismissed.
Or just it's also, I wouldn't even go as far as to say that historically we've been dismissed. I think recently we've been dismissed. I think historically we've not existed.
Yeah. I think we've not existed because people didn't realize that a need like this ever was a thing.
Maybe. I don't know why. I mean, it's a good question. The way I look at it is that research and design, okay, not R&D, but specifically kind of UX research and UX design.
You want to call it DNRs just so that it feels different?
Yeah, we should think of a different term so we can distinguish when we're talking about development or what was it? DNR? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. DNR. So when we're talking about, I think DNR, the way I look at it, again, I think using my history degree now, finally, after 10 plus
all these years.
But yeah, it's finally coming in handy. But no, I think that the historical story here is extremely important, because, you go back to R&D teams, which are basically engineers. They were they had these, going back to like AT&T. Mm-hmm. They were kind of like these people who you were left alone. They were they were like weirdos in the sense of they were more like mathematicians, and they weren't business folk, right? They were just kind of playing around, inventing stuff, following their curiosity. They weren't really being controlled in a sense by business and business forces and business incentives too much. I hope I'm not mischaracterizing that too much. But I think as we get forward in time, as you move forward in time, especially the last maybe even 20, 25 years, 30 years, that this movement or this growth of DNR, I think it's just it's the next, the way I look at it almost is it's the next step in R&D. So it is R&D. It truly is. But it's like R&D 2.0, because it's not just mathematicians and engineers. You're bringing in other people You're bringing in a new way of experimenting. Because listen, it's still going back, to the beginning of R&D. It's always been experimental. It's always been scientific. It's always been, scientists who are in these research labs, trying to figure things out that ultimately will lead to some sort of business value. But it's very curiosity driven. And I think that's kind of how we need to pitch it now, as like, that's why I keep on coming back to R&D, which is like, okay, we D&R people, designers and researchers, should be treated like R&D, but we should be also looked at kind of separate. Like it's how Gavin, our old former boss, in a sense, was either said that he wanted the lab to be set up, or was told that he had to have the lab set up this way, which is, it's separate from, we're doing something separate from the business. We're connected, but we're not finance guys, or we're not people with MBAs. We're people, we're individuals who work in different ways, and we kind of need freedom. The way I look at it, again, there's probably people who would not want to see it that way for a number of different reasons. But if we're buying into this idea that what D&R basically is just an outgrowth, or like a 2.0 of the typical R&D teams that existed, 2 generations ago. Now we're like, even maybe call it R&D 3.0 or something. If that's the case, then what those guys would do was a kind of like, hey, get off my back. Let us kind of figure it out. We have our methods, being connected to stakeholders and having stakeholders run the shop. Those guys in AT&T, those mathematicians, the Claude Shannons and, the guys who would win Nobel Prizes, would be like, fuck off. You don't know what I'm doing. Let me do what I'm doing, and I'll come and talk to you when I'm ready and I have something to share. And you know what? It's going to create a whole new business. So don't bother me.
Yeah.
It's that kind of mindset. And I don't think that's what we have right now.
Yeah. No, you're 100% right, man.
That's how I look at it. And it's partly why I really want to like make a point about R&D, and maybe almost over make the point. But I think it's important because I don't see people thinking about it this way, unfortunately. And I think it would help. I think it would help the field a little bit,
I totally get what you mean, man. Like I look at people, right? They say, okay, we have to design, we've got this project, we got to design this stuff. I was like, okay, cool. What is it today? It's absolutely horrible. Like, I can't even believe that even went out to customers to begin with. So great, cool. So that means we have to, it's not a minor enhancement the way these guys are describing it. Yes, maybe from a feature standpoint, from a technical standpoint, yeah. But from a design standpoint, it's almost a freaking overhaul, right? And so when they say that, okay, what are your timelines? When do you think this is going to be done? I said, guys, we're like reworking the whole thing from the ground up. Right? I'm not just going to stick your 2 extra screens and, give you your feature.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've been told, I've been told by like business folks sometimes where it's like, Chris, it's not about like, even if you get it to like, 3 out of 5, you don't need to get it to 5 out of 5. And I'm like, well, but this is how we do it. We want to make sure that we're providing an excellent experience and understanding all the different problems and fixing that so that customers have nothing to complain about. And he was, his pushback was kind of like, no, like, even if you get it to like 3 out of 5, like, that's fine. Everyone will be satisfied. You'll check the box and we'll move on. It's just kind of more of a business, I think, attitude maybe. And maybe that's unfair, but I think a lot of times
I would have put in my resignation as if somebody told me that. I was just like, screw this, I'm not working here.
Yeah, and I know I'm not going to even say where this was too, but it was a very low UX maturity level place with very low UX maturity level. But yeah, it was kind of like, wow, that's weird. I mean, I've heard really weird things people have said. Like, I've heard people say like, you're thinking too much like a researcher. You got to think more like a business person. It's like, yeah, but my title is why are you telling me not to think like a researcher? Like that's part of
that's my job.
It's what I you're telling me not to do my job. Exactly. It's just a weird statement. But yeah, I mean, it gets into this buy-in thing. It gets into the seat of the table thing. It gets into all these like issues that we're struggling with. I think one of the ways to try to come at, and I'm not saying by any means I have like the solution, but it's like, I think if we look at it from a historical point of view and see how we got to now, that can help maybe readjust a little bit, what we're doing, like, because it does seem to me like it's kind of a silly, it becomes a tangle when you have DNR people and you're putting them onto teams with business folk, in organizations that are not, we just had a conversation with Joe Boston, are not design led or not what he would call product led, which might be a little misleading, but yeah, just are not structured in the way that we work. And then you have stakeholders who are, quote unquote, leaders of the team, but don't even know what we do. And then you said like, it's like you spend all this time and all this energy, like convincing them or whatever, like getting them on board of like, this is what I'm up to. And then you get moved to a new program, a new project, and you're like, shoot, I got to start all over again.
Yeah. I mean, the day I realized that, okay, I'm going to really have to roll my sleeves and get aggressive with this now was when I had someone tell me that, oh, your design process is wrong. And I'm just like, excuse me. Right. And I had to explain to him.
What design process? What design process is right? Like, what did they offer you?
No, like foundationally, like this guy was just I don't even know. Like, I'm not even gonna get into who this is, but the fact is that he's not the first. He's one of many who've kind of who've said things that made me realize how distorted reality is for these guys when they think of R&D, right? And I had to literally explain to them that, look, I have to look at you.
When you say R&D, just so I'm aware,
DNR.
Are we talking about research and design or
research and design? I'm catching moving forward. Yeah.
I have to catch you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No,
go ahead.
Sure. It's just force of habit, man. Like that's actually what our team is called. So that's how we present ourselves to the rest of the org. But yeah, I had to actually explain to this person that, you're focused on you just want to know what you have to what you need to give to developers to ship the next thing, right? In order for me to do that, I have to know what the next 10 things are going to be, plan for that, work backwards from there, and give you designs so that every time you're ready to ship the next thing, I don't come back to you and say I want to retweak and readjust the previous thing because now you finally fed me information, right? That's another thing, right? We're held back from actually getting all the info we need to do the job just because, that's drop 3, that's drop 4, that's release number 5. You don't have to worry about that. We're focused on release 1. It's like, nobody. I'm building an ecosystem here, right? I'm trying to build a cohesive experience that everybody's going to love and enjoy and that makes sense across the board. You can't just tell me that not think about it, right? And this is where he was like, oh, yeah, your design process is wrong. And I was just like literally, I had to turn to our design lead and just ask him to pinch me because I thought I was dreaming. It's just nuts.
No, I mean I've encountered things, too, where I'm just like, is this like up is down? It feels like black is white. Like I'm like, I can't, I feel like I'm being gaslit here, and this is not, this is not okay. But yeah, I think a lot of it comes from growing pains of, again, looking at it from like we talked about, looking at it from a historical point of view. A lot of this stuff is like super new, and it's partly why, I mean, I'll actually probably maybe put a link to this. I recently wrote a piece that calls for more like theory in design and more theory in UX, because like, I think we need to straighten this shit out, man. Like, you know what I mean? Because there's a lot of people out there feeling, I think, a lot of pain in terms of how they fit in, who they should listen to, what they're up to, how the process works. And, you know, that's the other thing too. I feel like, you know, even going back to the old school way of doing R&D, you know, with the like the physicists and these kinds of dudes, like the Nobel Prize guys. You know, I think in many ways they're like, even great scientists are very creative. And I think obviously UX people are by definition creative designers. You know, you're designing and prototyping something, a new experience, you're bringing about something that's completely different and new for a given purpose. It's not just pure art, right? But it has to be functional. That's not how like regular business people operate, you know? For example, like, you know, Joe Boston, he's talking about being product focused, but it's very creative. His whole process is extremely creative. I mean, he is basically doing, maybe he would disagree with us, or disagree with me, but he's doing user experience R&D, human-centered R&D, which is what I keep on pushing. It's very creative. It's very different. It is not how, and that's what he's trying to call for. He's trying to say, we need to restructure the whole business around this kind of operating model, because these current or these legacy traditional, and you know, he kept on saying, well, we shouldn't be calling it traditional. We should be calling it bad.
Yeah. I guess traditional is just the respectful word.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's like the nice way of putting it. But
the moment that kind of comes from the top down, right? That this is how we become human centered and customer centric and all those nice buzzwords. Once that comes from the top down, and that becomes a way of sort of questioning every decision, that you want to do X, Y, and Z. Is that what the customer wants, right? If we started every conversation that way, that changes things. Then it doesn't matter what your boss or your boss's boss or your boss's boss's boss thinks, because, well, the board of directors think totally different, and you know, we're following their cue.
Well, yeah, it's about the way I mean, it's about challenging the assumptions. And how do you resolve, if let's just say there's a disagreement about some strategic direction that you want to take, you know, as a researcher, this is the way I look at it, is that you settle it with creating a study and then asking and then finding the answer in reality. And then that allows you to either say, go this way or that way. I'm making it seem, you know, a lot easier than maybe sometimes that it can be, but I agree. I mean, that's exactly, and that's why I love, and I feel like the research is so powerful. It's such an important piece to your team, because when you have those disagreements, I mean, I'll give you something that we worked on. One of our first projects, right, was like something as simple as, this is more of a marketing question, but it still is a business question, which is like, which design of, you know, there was a whole bunch of credit card, like the team was, the business was coming out with a new line of credit cards, and they had a bunch of designs that were made, and they were trying to figure out which design they should pick out of, you know, I don't know, what was it, like 20 or 15, something like that. And, you know, the head of marketing, we would talk to him, and he was like, what would typically happen is we would sit in the room, you know, all the head honchos or whatever, and they would give, you know, the one person would give their opinion, the other person would give, and they would sit there and they would never decide. I mean, all we did was just collect data on it very simply, and did, you know, ask people their preferences, analyze the data. There were clear trends emerged, and then he showed those slides to, you know, the senior leadership in the bank, and then the decision was made. Boom, on to the next thing. Very simple, you know. None of this, you know, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think?
Yeah. So you're basically saying that I should probably go and tell anyone who questions whether we need research or not and ask them that unless you are God, you're going to need research.
Yeah, and research shouldn't be treated as God either, because knowledge is another difficult, tough thing to come at, like pure objective knowledge. There are philosophers who have said that it's impossible for us to even like get that. But all you have to grant me is that, can we get closer to it? Can we get closer to truth? And if the answer, I mean, we as researchers may not be able to get you the truth, but can we do better than you just thinking about it yourself? Yes, of course we can. 100%. I believe that. And I can there are many ways into understanding why we can do that. But, that's it. As long as you grant me, we can get closer to that knowledge, which I know we can. Then it makes the research. It makes keeping researchers around justified.
So sometimes when I'm in conversations with different stakeholders and stuff like that, and I'm kind of getting a feel that a research ask is just around the corner, I'll sometimes just start facilitating and the conversation across the room and just try to pit these guys against each other, right? Just so that it's
to what end?
No, to the end where I tell them, hey, you know what's going to settle this debate? Let's do some research. And then they're all like, oh yeah, take my money, and next thing you know, they're like all waiting.
Well, yes, that's true. I typically don't want to commit myself. I just want to say, listen, I don't have a real dog in this fight. I'm happy to find out for you. But I'm not going to sit here and speculate because I certainly have an opinion. If you were to ask me what my opinion is, I mean, it goes into also solutioning too, because I feel sometimes uncomfortable. I mean, I have been asked a solution as a researcher. I don't feel very comfortable doing it. I feel giving recommendations is fine. I feel like keeping them slightly vague, even though that's actually a topic that maybe we want to discuss more, is about research recommendations. I feel like that could be a good one. But I think that, yeah, like I want to give you what is, I feel really, I'm going to work really hard to like structuring and tailoring that research based on the mystery that you have, or the question mark that's in your mind, or the decision that you have to make, but you don't know, but you have uncertainty, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to try to give you more certainty. But then I don't really, okay. So like if I'm positing a problem, let's just say, and that problem or something is going to help you make a strategic decision, for example, like knowing that problem exists. I don't, as a researcher, I can only tell you what is. I'm not going to, the facts, the information that I found cannot tell you as a business person what should be. That's a different question. And I'm not going to sit there and I can have an opinion. I'd be happy to tell you this could work or this could, but the research is not going to tell you that.
Yeah.
Right.
No, that makes sense. I mean, so the only,
so that's that's another reason. Like I try to stay hands off with a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. No. So the only time I actually do stay hands on, which is few, is when it's like usability study kind of things, right? Where it's going to go back to design work, and I'm probably also being part of this DNR team. I'm also doing the design myself, so I kind of have to now, right? And then in my case, because I come from a technology background, and I know how to smell the bullshit in the air.
Well, you also like designing too.
Yeah,
I think you like it. I think you like designing more than I do. Yeah.
I've wholeheartedly been enjoying it these last few months.
But I will bring up, I do want to, because I think what happened is that we did a usability study. I can't remember, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but I might be misremembering this, because it's been close to 3 years now, maybe even longer, 4 years.
I was a different designer back then, by the way. Let me just preface that.
but I don't know if you remember this. You probably do.
I know where this is going.
Do you know what I'm going to bring up? Which is like we did the study and we found the errors and this kind of thing. And you were like, let me let me take a crack at it. The research is saying this. I have these ideas for these solutions, and they were great ideas. It wasn't like I was against the ideas or anything, but I was like, I don't know if like you were going to be in the room when we're giving these reports, because what you wanted to do was basically, and I think I learned a lesson for this, but what you wanted to do was you wanted to actually show them like wireframes, like built out wireframes be like, hey, here's the problems, this is a usability issue. I'm going to solve it for you, and here's the wireframes. And it makes sense. It was logical, and I would imagine it fixed the problem. But we're sitting there going through the report, and the designers of that product were in the room. Yeah, and when they saw those wireframes, they were just like, wait a second. And I don't think it had anything to do whether they were good or bad. It was just like, hey, bro, you're on my toe. You're on my toes, dude. So you better step off. Yeah. And I want to avoid that.
Yeah, no, but the funny thing is it was never meant to be like that. It was meant to be more of,
no, I know.
I could like tell you, or I could visualize it for you.
Inspiration, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. But man, they got pissed. So yeah, I mean, I guess you and I both learned from.
They like immediately. I think one of them he stood up and was just like, "This is not." I don't even remember what he was saying, but he was talking about something about feasibility, and then we both looked at each other like, well, that didn't go as it should have gone.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
And I was like, all right, from now on, no more solutioning. This is.
No, that's why, man. See, so the only time I do it is when it's in my domain to do it, and where I actually know I have a fighting chance in this conversation.
Yeah, and sometimes they, like, I've done it, but again, in the future. So since that point, there have been times when I've done it as well, but it's been like super, super, super lo-fi. Because sometimes words can't get you. Like, I mean, I think your intuition is right, where it's like, and again, I think that we want to do maybe a conversation on at least like usability, if not just usability recommendations, but recommendations in general from research. But like, your intuition is right, and I share it, which is like, there are times when you find the issues and then you want to make a recommendation, and getting the solution is, or pointing them in the right direction is very difficult with just language. Like visualizing it is not only, easier, but it puts up more of like a guardrail to like say, hey, play in this space. Right. Whereas like a sentence can be misconstrued. Right. So, but yeah, I mean, I'll tell you one thing. One of the times that it did work was I was actually working in an innovation lab where the researcher and me and the designer were working on the same project, and we worked on, so like she and I did the reusability study together. I mean, I was the one who was leading it, right? But like, then when we were done, me and her together worked on the recommendations, and then she was the one who decided to make the solutions based on conversations she had with me. And then we came together with one report, which is actually a very powerful report of, hey, here's the research, here's the design issue, here's how we're solving it. And the report was basically done by me and her together. That was kind of nice.
Oh yeah. I think a lot of my projects are now shaping up like that, which is where it's becoming fun, right? Where it's not just trying to take this fluffy thing and explain to people who don't even understand concrete things. It's now we can take this fluffy thing, make it a little bit more concrete with design, and now spin the right story in a way that, really starts to drop some jaws.
One of the things before we sign off, I wanted to get your take on is like kind of thinking about some of the topics that we've talked about already, and then thinking about topics that I think either you want to continue to talk about, or topics that we haven't touched on yet that we want to continue to discuss. I mean, because partly why I bring this up is because I think in the beginning we were a little bit like, we didn't have clear goals as to like why we were doing this and why we were starting this, and that was fine. It was more about just like experimenting and recording our conversations that we were having already. But I feel like, for me at least, partly what I would like this podcast to at least, attempt to do, start to do, at least that goal, I mean, we may not get there, is to really be a place where we can talk and get people on and experts and leaders who can talk about things like maturity level and things like the topic that we were talking about before, which is like understanding what UX is and how to integrate it in a more harmonious way with businesses and business folk, and to think, and as I was saying before, to have more ideas about UX, to have more theory about UX, and to treat UX as a kind of a specialty, as even, you can even maybe even call it a science. Because I think as of right now, it's typically not seen that way. And I think it can get there. But it's just, we need to increase them. We need to continue to have conversations about how we mature the practice. We need to, in my opinion, we need to have, more things like conferences are great. Things like more publications, books, journals, this kind of thing. I think we need to get it a little bit out of, let's call it either the Wild West or like the Dark Ages. I mean, it's a fun area to inhabit sometimes because it's new and it's growing and it's changing. But it can also be, I find it to be sometimes, and I've talked to others, and even I know you would at least, I think, agree in part to this, is that it can be very painful at times when there's confusion and chaos.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, personally, I'm I obviously, want to keep learning and growing and bringing in all these amazing speakers and guests that we've been, talking to over the last few days and weeks.
Yeah. And maybe they all have interesting perspectives on some of the things we're struggling with that can help us in our career and help us in our thoughts.
Exactly. But yeah. I think more than that is I personally kind of want to build this community further, right? To really turn this into a community of like-minded folks across design, research, business, and technology, right? Folks that really want to understand this intersection of the three. So just simply because, if there's conflict, if there's frustration, if there's struggle in our roles, a lot of the times it's because we didn't understand them or they didn't understand us.
You're right. A lot of it can boil down. I mean, for me, you say, it can solve everything with communication. Maybe not. I think communication's a huge part of it. It's partly why I'm saying we need to have more theory. We need to have more ideas. We need to think about how we're communicating out what it is that we're doing and how we're demonstrating value. But I think it can not just be about communication. It can also be about bad incentives too, which I don't know how to possibly. That one's trickier.
I think more than communication and incentives, I think it's just education, right? Setting straight what reality really is, and I guess rewiring people to see the world. So going down a very brainwashy kind of route here, but
I mean, it gets me back to kind of taking that R&D kind of vibe, which is these old school R&D people, had this scientific mindset, this scientific attitude about being critical about things, not accepting the underlying assumptions, challenging them, testing them, going out, doing experiments. And even if the experiments were more trying to figure out playing around with electricity. Okay. I mean, that's not exactly what we do. We've kind of advanced, but what we do is we play around with trying to understand our customers, and similar methods apply, and business folk they don't care as much about that as we do. It seems. I mean, I don't want to put I should always try to not avoid complete, like, statements that say all and this kind of thing. But at least that's my experience so far, is that we're kind of living in two worlds sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think you're right. And that's kind of why I want to bring those two worlds together. Right.
But this is good. It's a good project. I think it's a good, I put it this way, looking at the bright side of things, there's work to be done.
There's work to be done. Yeah.
And we're still relatively young. So I think that if we both want to, keep at it, hopefully we can try to make a little bit of a dent in our small little tiny dent in the universe, if at all possible. So
exactly. I mean, it's like my buddies and I used to say in the startup that we've done a ton of things, we've come a long way, but it's only just day one. Yeah.
I mean, I think the thing we need to always keep in mind, is that this is a new discipline. It's a growing field. And I feel like diversity of, again, it goes back to kind of more ideas, diversity of ideas, diversity of opinions.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, let's make sure we keep the conversation going. For those listening in and those who've made it this far in the podcast episode, be sure to catch us on all the great socials, right? Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and now Threads too. And we'll see you guys on the other side.
Yep. Great having a conversation with you, Mustafa. And until next time.
Until next time.
That's a wrap for this episode of UX. If you want to stay up to date with Chris and Mustafa's latest episodes, be sure to subscribe to the show and leave them a review on your favorite podcast platform. It helps other listeners find the podcasts and join in on the conversation. And don't forget to check the line notes to follow the podcast on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn for behind-the-scenes content, updates, access to comment boards, and sneak peeks of upcoming episodes. Thanks for listening to UX, and we'll see you next time for some more insights into the ever-evolving world of user experience.